I knew a lot of women my age who spent their life force on relationships that were not good, worthy of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I made this decision at some point because I didn't want to be alone, or this idea that I don't want to grow old alone. This is also part of why it's so relaxing to grow old, that also we're not as motivated by novelty, but we're more in wonder at the ordinary. Like you're able to just really enjoy the everyday and the ordinary. And I feel that. And again, that is just such a relief.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis podcast with Chip Conley, where we explore how midlife isn't a crisis, but a chrysalis, a time of profound transformation that can lead to the most meaningful chapter of your life.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis. This is Chip Conley, and boy, am I excited for this episode. It was with Krista Tippett, who is famous for being one of the best interviewers in the world. Her podcast and show On Being, which was on NPR and then became a podcast, is legendary. And Krista recently joined us here at the MEA campus in Santa Fe, where she and I co-led a workshop on becoming wise and the art of living. This is a recording of an interview I did of Krista in front of that cohort, that workshop cohort. So it's very unscripted and in the moment. I hope you enjoy it. So, my dear.
Is this the first live podcast recording you've done?
No, we did live podcasts with Maria Shriver.
Oh, you did?
And Rich Roll and Michael Fronte in this room.
Oh,
so
great.
yeah,
Okay.
So we've done some of them, and I may have even forgotten one, but yeah, I mean the podcast has only been out for less than a month, and it's already in the top now probably 0.5% of podcasts in the world, which is not saying a lot because there's a lot of podcasts, but it's actually pretty impressive. It's so you know what this is all about. So what does it take to be a great interviewer?
Wow.
Because I need to learn from you.
Gosh, I've never thought about it that way. Well, one thing is I don't really think of doing an interview as much as having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say a few things. One thing I felt like I learned a lot after, it took me a little while to learn this, but at some point I realized a couple of things. I think hospitality is a core value for me as it is a core value for you.
You've said that listening is a form of spiritual hospitality.
Listening, yes. And I try to create a hospitable space. I mean, that's something I want to do everywhere. I mean, this really is something we have in common.
Yeah.
And I think to create a hospitable intellectual space, spiritual space, and that has meant, and you got this right too already, that starts before the conversation begins, right? That's in the spirit in which the invitation is extended. My producers, my audio engineers were always, especially I saw this really come to life during COVID, when people are, suddenly we're interviewing people in their homes, in their basements, and, everything being held in a spirit of warmth and just wanting to make it a comfortable experience for the person. Do you need a glass of water? Just before this, I was offered a snack and given a feast. And I'm sure I'd have room for lunch left. So, so that, and then I think another thing I learned is that, also I think the point of preparation is also hospitality, because we encounter each other at a bodily animal level before any words are spoken. And I think we know just within minutes whether this person is genuinely interested in us or whether they're asking curious sounding questions rather than being curious, or whether we need to kind of have our guard up. And I think a lot of our culture is kind of that I need to have my guard up feeling. So these days we kind of walk around like that. So you actually have to actively dispel it. And then the final thing I'll say, just that comes to mind that I've learned is, I think also the point of the preparation yes, is to transmit this feeling that I get you. Like, I've taken time. Like, first of all, I want you here. And that's another thing. If we meet somebody and we have that feeling, I don't have to explain or represent or defend. Your whole body relaxes, and that makes a lot possible. And I think also the point of the preparation is, when I know I'm going to interview someone, I obviously have a set of questions in my mind at the beginning, but often a lot of those questions fall away when I do the preparation. And I realize that's because I'm asking questions that are going to be interesting to them rather than just what is interesting to me. Those are a few things.
Yeah, are your questions serving them as much as they're serving you and the audience? And
Yeah.
I want to go back to your origin story. So so we're, as the group knows, but our listeners on the podcast don't know, we were born 9 days apart. You're a November 9th baby, 1960, and I'm a Halloween baby. We're both Scorpios from the year 1960. What was it like growing up in Oklahoma?
Oh, gosh.
And in the 60s in Oklahoma even more, but and how did you become who you are today with that origin story?
Yeah, where did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Long Beach, California. Okay. I mean,
Yeah. So the 1960s came to Long Beach, California.
Did not come to.
They didn't. Like most of the things you think of in the 60s, they kind of got there by the time I went to college, maybe.
Wow.
But you knew about them. You heard about them. Nobody was burning their bras in Oklahoma that I know. I mean, I think about this so much now because I really think the seeds of now were starting to be planted in the 60s. And there was a lot of progress, right? There was a lot of creativity in that decade. And some of the things we started then, what we're living with now is what we didn't quite carry through all the way, right? Like we made big advances in civil rights and we kind of stopped at some point and thought that because we'd changed laws and we'd integrated schools, the work was done. And the way I see it, because of the way I see the world, is, and not just me, like I have teachers like Isabel Wilkerson, we didn't do the work inside ourselves, right? We didn't, we changed the laws, we didn't change ourselves, and laws are fragile and laws can be undone. And so now I think we are faced with the work we have to do, or we don't get there. But also when I think about the 60s, I think of all the things that people think back on, as a child, growing up a little bit far from the action, watching the news, it was a decade of violence. I was born on the night John F. Kennedy was elected.
Yeah.
My father was a big Oklahoma Democrat, and almost everybody I knew in Oklahoma back then was a Democrat.
Yeah.
Just take that in. Really.
Well, Elizabeth Warren's from Oklahoma.
I didn't know Republicans. They didn't exist. So my father always told me that I was John Kennedy's good luck charm.
Oh.
And his assassination, people tell me I may be making this up because I was 3 years old, but I don't think I am. Like, I remember this soap opera playing in the background, which a few years ago I learned was actually the one playing in the background. It was in Texas, which was very close by. And so I actually thought, what did I do wrong? Like, my good luck charmness, really failed here. Because it was Kennedy, it was his brother, it was Martin Luther King Jr. And I remember, body bags coming home from the war in Vietnam, and some of them were young men from my town. And also my father was a political operator, big fish in a small pond.
Really?
And he helped get a Democratic governor elected. This was right around the Watergate era. Who was greedy and was a good guy and then wasn't a good guy. And a lot of people went to prison. He went to prison, this guy David Hall.
Wow.
So I was seeing that kind of Watergate phenomenon of actually, but in this case, a really idealistic, progressive figure really failed people and really failed that idealism. So all of this is in it for me when I think about like this world we've come to now. Yeah, I didn't really get the Whimsy. I didn't really get the Beatles.
Were you a first-class noticer? I have the sense that you were an observer. You observed things very well at a young age.
I think that really what I had to work with in terms of imagination and literature and thinking was the Bible, right? I mean, we went to church 3 times a week. My grandfather's Southern Baptist preacher. And truly, there weren't a lot of books in my house. The Bible was what I had. It was what was being introduced to me. And actually, the Bible is much more complicated and high drama than it was being taught to me. And I was enough, I did, delve into all the richness and contradiction there. And that was a lot to be getting on with.
Mm-hmm. How do you see the Bible as foundational for you today?
So, I ended up going to Brown, which is pretty flukish. Everybody thought it was a Bible college. And my grandfather was okay with it just because Roger Williams was a Baptist, but he would have been appalled if he knew anything about Roger Williams' morality. I think that then I ended up after that and ending up in divided Berlin in my 20s and becoming very political and then going to divinity school.
Yeah.
And then learning at a whole new level about the richness and complexity of that text, of those many texts. And a lot more about the Hebrew Bible, in which there are no heroes.
Mm-hmm.
It tells it like it is. And it can get pretty horrific, right? So I value the biblical text so much. And I think most of us who went to church a lot, haven't gotten an introduction to it.
Richard Rohr is just down the road here, and he's taught here in this very room. And you know what? Do you have any impression of Richard or?
I did interview Richard.
You did?
Yeah, once, and it was specifically about. He's hard.
He is hard
because he knows what he has to say. And
he wouldn't. Oh, so you couldn't crack him open.
Well, it's hard to get it to be conversational and interactive. But I interviewed him specifically about his work with young men and the desire for spiritual life, and the fact that he's worked with a lot of. I don't know if he's doing that so much anymore, but at one point
he's not doing it anymore. But
in prison,
he did a lot of men's retreats.
Yeah. And that men haven't felt addressed or so much included. They come at, we don't like to make generalizations about gender these days, and it is a spectrum, but it's also true that our religious and spiritual institutions, especially, certainly churches, were kind of run by women, actually. This part of the reason they're falling apart is because it used to be once upon a time that you had the congregational leader, who was for a long time a man, also in a synagogue, and you had this army of volunteer women before women worked outside the home. And now you've got this lonely leader who's supposed to do everything, and the structure doesn't make sense anymore. But so it's kind of been set up for women and women's spiritual orientation. And he saw this deep, deep longing. And if you think about our world now and how this crisis of masculinity and young men who are filling their hearts and their spirits with a lot of toxins, who are open to that because they haven't been offered more.
Yeah. My favorite book of his is The Falling Upward. Has anybody read Falling Upward? Yes. Sounds like lots of people.
I think that was the one I really liked when I was getting ready to.
The spirituality for the second half of life. And it's an exceptional book about the threshold, back to the threshold of midlife. He says things like, or writes things like, primary operating system for the first half of life is your ego.
Yeah.
And it's around midlife that your primary operating system becomes your soul, but nobody gave you operating instructions. But you can just feel it. And I think I feel it.
Yeah.
We talked last night about the fact that I was an introvert, then an extrovert, and back to an introvert again. And there's a sense of like, oh, it's because that inner landscape, there's so much, there's so much to explore in here. And so I credit Richard for helping me years ago when that book came out, before I knew him at all. That book helped me to understand, oh, there's something happening around midlife.
It would be such a good book to discover at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just really helpful. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, tell us about midlife for Krista Tippett. I mean, we define midlife quite broadly here, 35 to 75.
I like your expansion.
Yeah. So you're still at 64, you're still in midlife. But what's been your journey during your 40s and 50s and now early 60s?
I mean, you're asking me that at a moment at which I'm really living it and reflective about it. And what I'm reflecting on now is how I lived on the edge of exhaustion for 20 years.
You're still there?
No, I'm not.
You're not? Okay, good. It's
only yesterday.
Only yesterday. Okay, good.
And how that was a badge of honor, right? Like, I grew up thinking you just push yourself as hard as you can. And I, always had to justify my existence in the world.
And where did that come from?
Oh, it partly came from my family, my father. He really needed to be proud of me, but he needed me to do things that he would have done to be proud of. And so, he had a really
You had a success script.
Yeah, well, he was really a surprise, and he really liked what I did in when I came to him and said, I want to go to this place called Brown, just because I'd gone to debate camp the summer before and met my best friend there, want to go to Brown. I never heard of it, and I thought, oh, that's called Brown. So I was like geographic affirmative action. And I got in and she didn't, because there were 50 kids from her high school applying.
Oh, wow.
But when I did that, I think he was, but in the end, he liked it. He saw that it was an impressive thing. And then I was working in politics and journalism. He liked all that. He didn't like it when I went to divinity school, when I did, and even with the show. So I had a really terrible kind of rift with him. That's a long story.
You can talk about it if you want.
But
we have time.
Yeah, he was a person who was adopted when he was 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
And what we know now, and also I think he was terrified of, I think of those maps, those ancient, those maps where it said there be dragons at the end of the map.
Yeah.
I always felt like his childhood was like that. He just didn't really have normal emotional, he wanted to, and he tried. He was narcissistic in the way a 4-year-old who's been abused is narcissistic. They just can't see beyond their. How do we get onto that?
Because I'm a good interviewer. So do you think there's some, for you? I mean, you can say
to please my father, right?
So the generation trauma, is there some
Oh my gosh, I don't know how you. I just feel the older I get, it's just astonishing how we are always, no matter how long we're in these bodies, reckoning with our earliest years and these relationships with our parents. And I sometimes feel embarrassed by it, but I realize everybody else is in the same.
They're all nodding in this room, so yeah.
So I can go down that rabbit hole.
And so did you have a midlife chrysalis that in the last 10 years, 20 years, that was your transformational time that said, I need a metamorphosis?
Yeah.
And talk about that.
I think that for me has been the last few years. I did make a huge turn. It's just how I got to my father from I really was on this politics, journalism, geopolitics track in my 20s, on this fault line of a Cold War world. And I just turned away from that. I was at the very last year in Berlin, I was a chief aide in Berlin to our ambassador to West Germany, who was a Reagan appointee and a nuclear arms expert, and he was 38 years old, and I thought he was old, but
Wow.
I was 23. But now I realize just how young he was. I ended up sitting around these tables with him and his peers who were nuclear arms experts, and they were literally moving weapons of mass destruction. They were planting weapons of mass destruction in the name of defense, right? But still, on the earth. And I had this experience that I really didn't know what to do with, because on the one hand, I was having an exhilarating, thrilling, ego-tending experience. But these men who had huge careers, huge
Egos.
expertise, huge egos, like huge accomplishment.
Yes.
I would be with this ambassador, watch him give a brilliant speech about nuclear warfare. As a human being, he was about 13, and he was like a really immature 13-year-old boy. And not everybody, but most of the people I met at that level were like that. And so I get to the end of this experience, and I'm like, is this what, like, if I grow up to be these are the people I'll be spending my time with? And only on the one hand, I'm like, in my late 20s, I had this incredible resume, but I was so confused. And of course, there are seeds in that of what I ended up doing. But at that point, I just knew that I had a great resume, and I didn't know how I could live with continuing to build it or doing what it would have me do next. So that was, I would say, what I like about the young people now, they talk about the quarter life crisis.
Yes.
Like that'll be another expansion.
Well, we're actually having a workshop on that in January, so yes.
Also, I love how the younger millennials and the older millennials have their own generation gap. And I've heard,
Sort of like boomers. I mean, we're a little bit. We're definitely different.
I don't know. I
mean, there's some of those new rooms. We have to be careful. Those older boomers, I like you, yes, but I'm different than you.
I don't identify as a boomer.
Yeah.
But also like elder millennials. I've heard some of them describe themselves.
Yes.
So I think I had maybe a quarter life crisis.
Okay.
I didn't have that language then. I got married very impulsively, and lived in England for a year and wrote fiction. And then I had children and all of that. And I went to divinity school. But I didn't know what I was going to do with divinity school. And so then very gradually I ended up starting this, getting to this.
This is on doing, not on being, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then when I got back into having a professional purpose, I did kind of default to that. I have to justify my existence and do it right. I mean, it was a passion project, right? Do it right. But I look at my own children, I look at younger people now, and I don't want them to think that you have to make a choice between professional success and just your personal vitality. I don't want to live in a world where I think that's a necessary choice, but I definitely did that. And I raised my kids, and I was divorced for a long time and was pretty much single parenting. That's hard, right? So building this big thing and attending to my children. And that was really kind of 20 years of my life. But then the midlife, this threshold, the chrysalis, was, probably pandemic. I don't know. I like to think I would have ended up in the same place. It might have taken me longer to think that it was okay for me to think this way. Ben's been around and watching this, and he saw some of the transition. But I just gradually realized that I just didn't want to be carrying what I was carrying.
Carrying. As opposed to caring.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's both a little bit.
It is both.
Yeah.
It is both, but I think part of the discernment was I didn't ever stop caring.
Yes.
But I can be who I am and do what I do in a way that is life-giving and not depleting. And I do think that one of a gift of aging, but maybe one that's hard to bear, is you get to a point, or at least I did, and I know I see a lot of people where you simply can no longer lean into the depleting. So sometimes people, when I took the show off public radio in 2022, it's like in a world in which everybody wants more platforms, and I kind of gave the biggest one up. And people said, "Oh, you're so brave," but I couldn't not do it. I couldn't not do it. So it doesn't feel brave to me. It was just.
And the reason you couldn't not do it was because you were exhausted to the point of just, it was too much.
No, it was a life of deadlines, which most of those 20 years, I was perfectly comfortable with. I mean, we do what is necessary for our work, but what I started to think about and care about was, what am I not doing because I am living this life of deadlines? Some of these decisions, and at the end of last year, I really gave up a lot of the organization. So there is an organization now, but it's like down from a $6 million budget to a $1 million budget. So just that, like the constant raising of money.
There's a question I want to ask you related to what you just said a moment ago. One of our favorite questions at MEA is, 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't learn it or do it now? Partly because anticipated regret is a form of wisdom. The idea, and frankly, at 20 years old, you don't have anticipated regret. You got a long runway ahead of you. But at 50, 60, 70, 80, Jack here in the room, happy birthday to you, you don't have as much runway. So there's a sense that you need to have a catalyst. When I moved to Baja, I said, I'm never going to learn Spanish. I was 56 years old. Even though, that was the language, and I'm not going to learn to surf. But then when I put it in the context of 10 years from now, at 66, will I regret that I didn't learn Spanish, that I started learning Spanish and learning to surf? Yeah. What about you? What might you regret 10 years from now if you didn't learn it or do it now?
I loved writing. And for most of the last 25 years, I felt like I was like an interloper doing radio podcasting. That I felt like I would be a writer when I was younger, that I would write. But then I didn't. I just couldn't. It was always having to be squeezed in among these deadlines. So actually this year, my top priority is getting this book written. I mean, I'm doing other things, but I can't. And the fall is going to be totally prioritizing that. I just spent a month writing.
Can you tell us about the book?
Well, we're going to talk about it in the next few days. You're going to learn a lot about the book.
Okay. How about for our podcast audience?
In podcast. Well, it's in many ways it's the fruits of this quarter century of conversation, and now how all of the conversations are kind of interacting in my mind, and creating a way to tell the story of our time that is not the story that the New York Times is telling me. It's ways of seeing and arts of living, and really, I think the question that is on my heart and that I feel is there for so many people is how to be present and stay present to this world, which also means getting present to ourselves, right? So it's not an either. It's not personal, but it is intimate and civilizational at once. And we know that we live in a chrysalis time. I think this is a chrysalis century. Yeah. So it's like it's how I describe that work, that calling through this life that I've had in this century, the early.
So more writing.
Enjoying life, which I do think this was an American way. It was like optional. I would do it when I had time after I'd done important things. And
Well, what brings you joy? What are the things? Are there anything from childhood that you?
I'm so much better at being joyful today now than I was when I was a child.
Okay, so what brings you joy today?
Well, music brings me joy. Reading brings me joy. People bring me joy in a way. I mean, I'm definitely an introvert. I am absolutely an introvert. But I I do love human beings, and I think as I grow older, maybe a little bit the different direction for me.
You're going to introvert to extrovert.
I'm getting more extroverted. I do have to go away and hide after I've been with people a lot,
Yeah.
and just kind of regroup. I also, you know what, I'll say my friendships, people. I have just fallen in love in the last year for the first time in 15 years. And also in that 15-year period, I pretty much decided that
You can say it. You can say it.
well, here, let me say it this way. I knew a lot of women my age
Yes.
who spent their life force on relationships that were not good, worthy of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I made this decision at some point because I didn't want to be alone. Or this idea that I don't want to grow old alone. And I used to say to my best friend, who was just constantly going from one relationship to the other, I said, Serene, we are going to grow old alone, okay? These men are going to probably die before us. Sorry, guys, but it's true. So, like, that can't be a reason to spend your life force. And it just to be in relationship. But what I ended up doing, which I'm really proud of, okay, like this I want to own, is that at some point, about 15 years ago, I decided that I heard myself one day feeling sorry for myself because I didn't have love in my life. And I realized that that is such a false statement, that there are so many forms of love. And I ended up just deeply investing in my relationships with other women, which is actually not something I had done in my life so much. It's just my mother, we're not going to talk about her.
Okay.
But that has been one of the most joyful gifts of these last 10, 15 years of my life are these beautiful friendships. And also my love for my children is another form of love. So it's like, at any given time, there are many, many kinds of love, and you don't have to have every single one of them. In the last couple of years, coming in pandemic, what I realized while I was grounded in Minnesota in my very quiet, peaceful neighborhood in St. Paul, which on some level was a lovely place to be grounded. But I realized that the place I lived, Minnesota, had been the place where I did two things. I worked and I parented. And while I have people I love in Minnesota, all of my deeper relationships were elsewhere. And I also felt like I had gotten self-sufficient to the point that probably wasn't good for me. Mm-hmm. And actually quite different from what I say to other people. So I kind of opened myself in these last few years to this other kind of love. And I'm really, there's a lot of joy, a different kind of joy in my life right now through that kind of companionship. But I'm really glad to know that I can live without it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to live without it right now, but I'm grateful. I feel like the way I oriented around these last 10 years around love as such a big, multifaceted thing will serve me for the rest of my life.
You wrote a book called Becoming Wise and about the art of living. And so what does wisdom mean to you? And how are you wiser today at 64 than you were at 44? Mm-hmm. Beyond, you talked about the exhaustion and just being on the treadmill and the success script. So beyond that, maybe it's learning to feel comfortable being alone.
Yeah.
I don't know. What does wisdom mean to you?
So after I wrote that book, at no point in the book do I define wisdom. And I didn't realize that until after I wrote it. And people said, "Oh, what is your operating definition of wisdom?" I didn't have one.
Your editor didn't ask for that. No. That's strange.
Because what I was doing was, what I did is I basically took the whole, at that point, it was 13 years of conversations. And there were a couple of years and all I did was go back through transcripts and try to just distill what kept rising up and who was perhaps most articulate about a certain thing, and then writing around that. So, writing in my voice, but kind of still being in conversation. But I never, so these five kind of, these places in us where love, these parts of being human where I think wisdom shines, is how I organized the book, but I never said this is wisdom. So later, when I had to think about it, so my definition, I was listening to your, what was your definition?
I said metabolized, and mine changes every month, but metabolized experience mindfully shared for the common good.
Yeah. So there's resonance. So what I started to, this is kind of a really pared down. I think if any of us think of the wise people we've known, and most of the wise people in the world are not famous, but we all have wise people in our lives, somewhere in our lives, right? I think that the difference between wisdom, so the difference between, like, say, knowledge or accomplishment, is that you can kind of quantify those things, right? It's not that a wise person can't be knowledgeable or accomplished, but those are things you can kind of point at, and they have this substance, and there's a metric to them. And I think that the measure of a wise life is the imprint it makes on other lives around it. And one of the kinds I've been interested in my work also in those people who are not famous and below the cultural radar, but in whatever work any of us does in our field, we know that there are these teachers, right? These individuals who've just radiated something. They've influenced generations and generations of practitioners. And I think, like, those are and then there are people in communities. And those are, that I think is how, is a good way to, it's kind of an operating definition of wisdom. So I'm kind of getting more at that second half of yours, like, for the common good.
The common good, exactly. It feels to me like we're moving into an era where we need more wisdom. The world is complicated, and knowledge is sort of like a math equation, like it's a plus sign.
Yeah.
You accumulate knowledge, but you distill wisdom. And so in a time where it's complicated, there's so much out there. Trying to distill what's essential is really important. And in the history of mystery schools and wisdom schools and things like that, they actually tended to emerge in times of stress on the human consciousness. So my hope is that midlife wisdom schools like MEA are going to become, all over the world, not as MEA, but just as us being a catalyst for others. What are the practices you use to ground yourself? What are the practices you use to, on a regular basis that help you to have a grounded knowing, to quote, I think A.V. Northcutt,
have a grounded knowing.
Yeah.
So one thing I'll say about wisdom, I think this is true of mystics, and it's also to some extent true of poets. Like, the people who are the greatest poets, mystics, and wise people will never say, "I'm a wise person."
No.
Right? So, like, if you ask me, how do you stay wise? I find that really hard, but you're not asking me that.
I'm asking how to say, how do you stay with a grounded knowing?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about wisdom, I mean, we could talk for an hour about the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge becomes less relevant. It just inevitably does. I don't care how brilliant somebody is at the time. I was just at the Aspen Ideas Festival last week, and I was musing on how 3 years ago, there were certain people who are, I think, like the knowledgeable people who come up with phrases like the world is flat, and I mean, this is, very smart people. That worked for a little while.
Yeah.
And then history moves on, and we need other ways to describe reality. Wisdom ages well, right? Like, this is why one of the things that I want to do in this next chapter of my life is be a good steward of my archive and really be creative with that, because, now I'm really appreciating how so much of what's in there, like, those voices become more relevant rather than less relevant. And how, to me, so much of that about staying grounded is about our attention, like attending to what is, to what has meaning and not what is yelling for my attention. And that's a real discipline these days.
So are there practices and rituals, whether it's meditation or prayer or journaling or whatever it might be?
I think this is hard for me to answer because so much of, I've had across time, I've had so many different ways of coming at that, right? I've had times where I was meditating silently. I've had periods of my life, it was a period where I wrote a prayer because I felt like this is my spiritual mother tongue is prayer. And I didn't want to just be meditating.
And you wrote a prayer.
I wrote a prayer.
Do you remember what it is?
Yeah. Well,
Will you
I don't
say
know
it
if
to
I can
us?
recite it. I can bring it. I'll bring it tomorrow.
Okay. For you podcast listeners, you just have to come here next time Krista speaks in.
For about a year and a half, I prayed this prayer every day. And it was a prayer, it grew out of me asking what I most desired, how I most desired to grow. And I realized that my heart needed to open more. So it began, grant me this day a heart that keeps learning to open, that keeps learning to open. And this was also one of these times where you kind of figure out things that are inherited from those early days, and you just can't believe you're still hanging on to them. And I really needed to let go of it, but I hadn't just let go of it with the course of time. And I didn't even know what I was asking for, how I would be different if my heart were more open. But I was able to put words around that much of it.
And it sounds like it's manifested.
It absolutely manifested. I recently shared it with the man I love, who I've been with for a year, and because I am a person with an open heart now. And it's not that I wasn't, I was obviously shining a light on other people who have open hearts and helping people open their hearts. And I think my heart was open enough to know that it could be more open, right? I've had times where I did what I call contemplative reading, and I still do that sometimes. I'll take a book of poetry or a book that is very beautiful and dense, and especially when I was working so hard, when I didn't have the mind space to say, I'm going to read this book. But I just find a beautiful book that kind of fills me and calms me and also inspires me, and just read a paragraph at a time. So I've had all these different rituals. And right now, I've been moving around so much. My ritual is in being in love.
You're a giggly girl right now.
Yeah, it's great to fall in love after you've already figured out what you do for a living, raised your kids,
You've earned it, girl. You've earned it.
To be an adult, and then you get to be a child again.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a 64-year-old child. You and I both turn 65 later this year.
Yeah.
What does the word retirement mean to you in the current context of the world, as opposed to 60 years ago, what it meant?
I have no relationship to this word, retirement. I said to you yesterday, I'm fascinated by the evolution of aging. I really feel like age is age is kind of like relative life to life and body to body. I feel like maybe this wasn't true, but if I think about what retirement meant to me when I was growing in that world I grew up in, it would be that people would really just stop doing everything and kick back. And I think even though I'm sure there are people who like to work until their last day, and that may be new.
Farmers used to do it.
And
ranchers
still do, yeah. But I think even if somebody isn't working in the same way, we have knock on wood or pixels or whatever, we have many more active years to be alive, right? And to be of service and to be cultivating joy. And so the idea of retirement just feels too small for me to be a label of who I would become at some point. But I'm all for working less.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I wrote a blog post not long ago saying knowledge workers are confused by retirement. Because if you were doing backbreaking labor and mind-numbing work in a factory, Sun City sounded really good.
Yeah.
Maybe learning to golf, having a martini at lunch. That was sort of the way that era lived. But, if you're doing knowledge work or you're doing creative work, or you're somebody who is developing what Arthur Brooks calls the crystallized intelligence, this idea, which is an alternative way of looking at wisdom, at 60 or 65, you're just finding your stride.
Yeah.
And so I'm not suggesting that you have to work at the same pace, but maybe you start doing new work that is more nourishing, that is tapping into that wisdom.
A few years ago, I started to notice my brain working differently and kind of really went down this rabbit hole of what we know about the aging brain. And I think even a few years ago, if you said the aging brain, you just imagine deterioration.
Right.
And so what they say is that, as our brains grow older, we may be less able to kind of to learn new things. Like novelty is not, and this is also part of why it's so relaxing to grow old, that also we're not as motivated by novelty, but we're more in wonder at the ordinary. Like you're able to just really enjoy the everyday and the ordinary. And I feel that. And again, that is just such a relief. But also, what your brain gets good at over against what it's less inclined to do, you can't remember names, so what, right? Like I feel like my brain's, a few years ago, I'm not feeling this so much now, it's when I was working so hard. I feel like my brain was like a filing cabinet and all the files were just stuffed. Like there was no more space for new information. But what I feel now is they say that what grows are our powers of synthesis. And I am so aware of that.
Yeah,
right? All these connections being made, and they're just being made naturally, fluidly, without my needing to attend to them. And for me, that means that, the conversations are in conversation with each other in my head. And so I really love being interviewed these days because I never know what is going to come out. And I'm not, if I sit around and say, what do I know? What have I learned? That's a hard question. But if I get a question coming at me and it just has to happen organically, it's just so fascinating.
There's a guy named Dr. Gene Cohen, and he has he's passed away. He has a book called I think it's called The Aging Brain. And he calls it four-wheel drive of the brain. He says that as we get older, when we're young, our brain is fast and focused. And as we get older, we learn to go from left brain to right brain, from logical to lyrical, all in the same sentence.
So great.
And there's a sense that you can traverse a broader sense of your brain shrinking a little bit, but as it's shrinking, you're not so right brain or left brain segmented. You're not so binary.
Definitely feel that.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you're doing one or the other.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, last question. So let's say someone 30 years younger than you, a lovely woman who's on a career path and married, and she's doing a lot, she's juggling a lot. That happens in our 30s and our 40s. She comes to you and she says, I want an auction to have tea with you. And we're having it next week. Could you come to the tea that we're gonna have with a wisdom bumper sticker?
Bumper sticker.
Just an aphorism that really has your wisdom fingerprints on it. Basically, what's the piece of wisdom that you might offer someone younger than you that's hard won? What's the origin story of that wisdom as well?
Let me first say that I'm really bad at questions like that. Although I've always, this was only true of Twitter, and I don't think it's true of Instagram or the others, but I always felt like Jesus and Moses and Buddha would have been amazing on Twitter, right? Because they did these one-liners, right?
Or on Madison Avenue.
But what comes up for me is take delight. Don't make that optional. Intentionally, it is a human birthright. It is life-giving. It is fuel. It is even fuel for whatever you're fighting. Don't let anybody take that away from you. It doesn't have to be in opposition to doing good things, making things happen. That's what I wish I had done more of.
And you're doing it now?
I'm doing it now.
And let's give her a hand for the fact she's doing it now. Thank you, Krista. Did I do okay?
Yes, you did a great job.
Okay.
The way you know that is that I was just so full of things to say.
Oh, good. Good. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely.
Right. All right.
Well, this is the first time I'm doing an outro, not an intro, but an outro for one of my podcasts. And each week I'm going to try to really distill down maybe 3 nuggets of wisdom that I heard in the podcast, or in this case, actually in the course of teaching with Krista for a week. So first of all, there was a term that Krista used in the course of our workshop that around spiritual hospitality. And I think I asked her about it in the interview you just heard. Spiritual hospitality is a really interesting idea. The idea that we are here on earth to be spiritual beings, helping to open the doors for other people. There's a beautiful Rumi quote. It's not a quote, but it's a poem called The Guest House. And it really speaks to the idea that our role in life is to be an innkeeper for our own emotions and the emotions of others. But just as if your life is not to try to have rain all the time, the point of spiritual hospitality and Rumi's guest house is you let the emotions come through you so that you don't get stuck in a rainstorm or in the sun because you can't control that. So to me, spiritual hospitality is really about listening. And that is one of the most important things I heard from Krista, both in this interview, but also during the week, is how do we listen to each other, to inside, and then to the greater consciousness of the world. Secondly, she said at one point during the week, so this idea that I love who I am becoming. This is, I think, a real beautiful premise around aging, to see that maybe what we're supposed to do in the course of our lives is to actually become more of who we were supposed to be. And Krista is one of those people. I mean, she grew up in Oklahoma, Christian family, liberal-minded, but Christian and Bible thumping. And she, to become who she has become from her roots, really took an awful lot of willingness to take a unique path. The third thing that I will just take from my time with Krista is just the premise that we are supposed to be generative in life. To be generative means you're generating things. Your generativity, based upon Erickson's coining of that term, is about doing things for future generations. And one of the things that I really took from my time with Krista is presence is important. And as we get older, the most important thing we can offer to younger people is our presence. So that's my quick, down and dirty 3 lessons from my time with Krista. I hope you enjoyed this particular episode. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Midlife Chrysalis. This show is produced by Midlife Media. If you enjoyed this episode, help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform.